Waiters and waitresses of Reddit, what is the most personal conversation you walked in on when going to take an order or check on the table? So, an elderly couple sat down at a table in my section once, and the husband obviously had some severe health issues, oxygen tank, and a nurse with him, so I guess he decided to confess to an affair during World War II with one of the nurses in Germany. The wife was a little teary-eyed at first, but forgave the guy, saying, "We've been married almost 75 years. You think I'm gonna let the past ruin it all now?" Next story. Slightly different, as I was a barman of a hotel, but still relevant. A guy was drinking at the bar by himself and almost grumbling and talking to himself. As a top barman, I asked how he was, if he was having a good night. He proceeded to tell me it had been a crappy night and that his mates had been fighting and he had enough, so came back to the hotel. He then said he just wanted to go back home to see his 6-month-old daughter back at home. However, this is where it gets odd. He told me that he could not go see his daughter as his wife had stabbed him in the back. Now I'm thinking his wife had cheated on him, but no, his wife literally stabbed him in the back. I didn't believe him until he decided to remove his shirt, and there it was, a freshly bandaged wound, possibly a week or two old. I had no idea how to console a man who had been stabbed in the back by his wife. Next story. Not in the food industry anymore, but when I was, I had a table that consisted of a young teenage boy, his parents, and his girlfriend. I'm not sure how they got to this point in the conversation, but it came up somewhere between ordering their food and the food being ready that the boy and the girl weren't virgins anymore. The table was a mess of emotions for the rest of the night. The fury of the father, the disappointment of the mother, the defiance of the son, and the mortification of the girlfriend. I'm not sure why they didn't leave immediately and sort it all out at home, but they stayed the whole meal and made things awkward for everyone. I'm sorry, y'all. Who goes to Wendy's and then tells mom and dad that you're not a virgin anymore? What? What happened here? Actually, I don't want to know. I really don't. Anyway, next story. Well, I had someone wave me over to take their order while their fellow guest was in the bathroom, at which point she burst into tears and told me she was getting a divorce. Her mother had just died, she was about to be fired, and she wanted the grilled salmon. Honestly, had no clue what to respond apart from, "How well cooked would you like it?" Poor woman. I still wonder about her and I hope she's alright. Next story. I once served a man and his adult daughter. She was begging him to give her mother a second chance. I gathered from the bits of conversation I heard that the mom had a pretty serious mental disorder. Both dad and daughter admitted that the mom was not at fault, but dad was a broken man after living with this for so many years. It was heartbreaking. I tried not to eavesdrop, but this was a small cafe, and their table was very close to my barista station. Next story. Oh man, I feel like it happened to me all the time. Once it was a younger girl, 16 to 18, telling her mother she was pregnant. Her mother just could not believe it, couldn't wrap her mind around it. Insisted there is no way the girl is not a virgin, and she needed to go to the doctor to figure out what was wrong. Poor girl ended up in tears. Clearly, she was already frightened and needed help and guidance. Then watched a few couples break up. Usually they manage to keep it together and just sit there angrily until their meal is finished. But one time, one of the parties just sat there sobbing. I brought her an ice cream when her newly ex-girlfriend left. I usually steer into the skid of awkwardness during breakups by keeping an especially upbeat and happy tone. And we had a regular who brought dates to the restaurant all the time. We thought he was single until he brought his wife in, and one of the servers said, "Who is this one?" right in front of the wife. I couldn't believe my ears at the rude question alone, but the wife's facial expression made it clear she picked up on it. And when the husband introduced her as his wife, I immediately had to get out of that awkward situation. Thank God it wasn't my table. Next story. While a guy's girlfriend was in the bathroom, I started a conversation with him about his tattoos. They were super colorful and well done. It turns out he had done them himself. He pulled out his phone to show me some of his other work. He was swiping through his gallery, back piece, arm piece, leg piece, POV video of him effing his girlfriend. Nice angle too. He was really giving it to her. Huge boobs were bouncing and she was screaming. He shut off his phone real fast. We both acted like nothing happened. His girlfriend came back to the table. They ate quietly, left quickly, and tipped amazingly. Never saw them again. Next story. I didn't walk in on a conversation, but I had a business lady proceed to have a meltdown. She started to cry because she yelled at her kid. "He was laughing and being a happy boy, but I was in a rush to work, so I told him to shut up." I told her he would forgive her and suggested she should explain to him that she was having a rough morning. She then hugged me and told me she was going to take the rest of the day off and spend time with him. Next story. I had a nice young couple come in with their toddler daughter. She was obviously a working mother, had a shirt on from another restaurant. All good. One of the few times I'm walking by, I hear her literally begging him to start paying his child support because she was struggling. 10 minutes later, the dude's girlfriend showed up, smoked a couple of cigarettes at the table with the toddler, and then the dude took off with her. I hated him so much and bought the mother's meal for her. Next story. I watched a kid, probably 13 to 15, coming out to his parents. Got to give him a ton of credit for doing that in public, but you could tell dad was about to flip his crap. Mom looked sad but was really supportive, just never expected to walk up to refill a glass of tea to hear a kid coming out to a house family. Next story. Well, I had a table the other day that was celebrating graduating from rehab, but I didn't walk in on the conversation, they just told me. Someone else had graduated the month before after getting hooked on meth. It all felt pretty personal, but they had been drinking and felt like revealing, I suppose. I congratulated them, of course. Good crap, guys. They even tipped all right. Next story. I walked up to a table one time that wasn't mine to drop off an appetizer, and I say, "Hello, here's your mozzarella and the guy is proposing to his girlfriend. And then I say, "Sticks?" And then I turn and run away. But why? Why would you propose in a crappy, cheap restaurant where the servers wear jeans and t-shirts and throw peanut shells on the floor? Now I am forever a part of their engagement story. Edit. Apparently I cannot spell or format early in the morning. Also, you're right. It totally might have been a sentimental place for them. However, give the restaurant a call before you decide to propose there, or at least tell your server, because, so something like this doesn't happen? I totally ruined their moment. If we would have known, we could have at least tried to make it more special. Next story. On the other side, we were out to dinner one time with my husband's parents, and generally speaking, we all get along great. But that night, for whatever reason, my mother-in-law decided to vent every single thing bothering her about us in the middle of dinner, loudly in the middle of the restaurant. It was baffling and irritating because nothing she said was really valid or fair, and it was excruciatingly embarrassing since we're both introverts, and we have to have everyone staring at the ridiculous display that she was putting on. Father-in-law then said, "Dear, let me just take you home and we'll talk about this later." And she loudly huffed, "Yes, I don't want to sit here and eat with them when they're being so disrespectful." And then they both just continued sitting there, and the waiter awkwardly tried to give us our salads while she's glaring and huffing, and my husband and I and father-in-law are just awkwardly sitting there. Then she got another rant going, just in time for the waiter to bring the main course, and it was, again, excruciatingly awkward. And this one event is now why I do everything I can to ensure we meet places in separate cars. Because we'd driven to their house and then all gone to dinner together in their car. So we were horribly trapped during this whole mess. I don't know how much, if anything specifically personal, the waiter overheard, but you could tell he was cringing so hard from the discomfort of the whole situation. He'd been a nice, chatty waiter too, but the second she started ranting, it was like he was being tortured by the secondary embarrassment, just like we were. I despise people like that who just take down the energy for everyone involved, not just the family, but probably everyone else in that restaurant. Okay, sometimes we could refer to these individuals as emotional vampires. I hate them and they suck the life out of you. Anyway, next story. So, one time I walked up to the table to hear, well, before I knew it, I had one up my butt, one was getting double penetrated, and one was giving a BJ to two guys at once. It was some of the best sex I ever had, really. I need to hook you up with my brother and his friends. Then the other woman responds, as long as he brings his friend with the monster wiener, I could go for a few days and not walking, right? And then they order their food. I bring out the food and hear them discussing who fisted them the best. Next story. Worked in the kitchen of a rather small bistro a few years back, and a husband and wife ended their marriage 10 feet away from me. Middle-aged guy shows up, gets seated at the table directly out of the serving window, and proceeds to wait for 10-15 minutes or so for the wife to get there. He had driven, I don't know how she got there, and the wife is around 10 years younger, attractive, blonde, not really out of his league, but we could instantly tell she was high maintenance. But he was very sweet, brought her flowers and pulled her chair out. For the next 20 minutes, he did everything he could to try and get her attention, but she wouldn't take her eyes off of her damn cell phone for more than a few seconds at a time. He kinda gruffed, and we could tell he had had enough. So he pulled out his cell phone and sent a text message. She looked up from her phone a few seconds later and says, "Really?" To which he replied, "Yes, I've had enough." So she stood up, took his car keys off of the table, stormed out, and did a 100-foot burnout in his Charger leaving. He asked if we could make their dinner to go, and then we realized that she had his wallet. He was able to get her to bring his wallet back, and then she left in another burnout. Before he left, he gave his wedding band to his waitress and asked her to throw it in the trash can, and took his food to go and just started walking down the street. Next story. Worked in a national chain family restaurant in a small college town. Often worked Sunday mornings, and after the wave of families from 9 till noon, you start getting the hungover college kids. There were a lot of pairs in there that were clearly one-night stand hookups that you can tell someone said, "Well, at least you buy me breakfast." A lot of avoiding eye contact, staring at phones with awful sex hair and makeup from the night before still on. No judgment though, they were getting more than I was. But I walked up to a table one time of a couple figuring out where they could get plan B. I realized that and tried to do a sharp turn to a different table, and it seemed like a personal moment, but they might have noticed me make my beeline. I think because they were really seemingly embarrassed for the rest of the meal. I definitely could have done it smoother. Next story. Worked at a restaurant in high school. It was a little Midwestern place that served lots of pork chops and catfish. Anyway, every Friday night at around 6:15 p.m., this same elderly little couple came in and went to the same table just next to the kitchen door. Not my idea of a romantic table, but it was more or less off by itself. He would get a Budweiser, she would get a screwdriver, they'd have dinner and talk over a few drinks. They always tied up the table for like 2 hours, but it was no biggie. Dinner was always $25 to $30. He paid with 220s and never wanted change. They did that every week for a year and probably years before that. But the worst thing I ever walked in on wasn't a conversation at all. One evening, he came alone. She'd passed away. Every Friday for the next 3 months, he still came in. Ordered a Budweiser and ate dinner, always by himself. I offered to pick up his check and the owner said I didn't need to. They were never going to charge him anymore. He passed away a few months later. Next story. Not really a conversation, but more of an event unfolding. One of my tables consisted of a man and a woman of about mid-30s to 40s. It was lunchtime. As I walk away from the table after refilling drinks, 2 women of about the same age are being seated in the booth directly adjacent to this man and woman. I walk away as there is nothing odd occurring as of yet. As I am headed back into the kitchen, I hear an extremely loud gasp and see a woman running to the bathroom with her face in her hands. The man jumps up and runs to the host stand with the woman he is with and literally crouches behind the podium, thinking that nobody could see him if he did this. Everyone is extremely confused at this point, but it becomes extremely obvious that he has been caught cheating and is trying to run away. He throws some money at the host and jets out of there with his mistress. His wife comes back out of the bathroom, obviously sobbing, and sits back down at her table. Her and her friend then proceed to order and cry for the next hour. This part was pretty odd, IMO. TLDR, man is caught cheating at lunch when his wife is seated next to him and his mistress at a steakhouse. Next story. Mom says, "Yeah, I can't believe Laura's gonna be effing a Lyft driver." Then the aunt says, "She's throwing her life away." Then the mom says, "And that's what I told her. First she gets an STD with that loser of a boyfriend. She complains about how he never told her, but I even said to her to stay away from him, he's trouble." Aunt says, "Oh, I remember that." Then the mom says, "Now she's trying to pay for a baby on a Lyft driver's salary. I need to tell her to go get an abortion." Then the aunt says, "But I thought you don't believe in that." And then the mom, whisper shouting, says, "I don't want a black baby." Yeah, it was a small restaurant, and there were only 2 tables. Next story. "Yeah, ran him over and left the body there," was the conversation that I walked in on. It was a married couple, late 40s or early 50s. If it had been in regards to some sort of story, I don't think they would have that "oh crap, did he hear that" expression on their faces. Next story. Bartender here. Overheard 2 women sitting at my bar talking about their recent dating experiences. I was serving drinks, and as I walked past, heard one of them exclaim to the other, "And then he had the audacity to stick it in my ass." Oh, the audacity. Next story. This is a conversation that everyone in the restaurant heard. I had like a 35-year-old guy that was pure muscle, bald by choice, Echo Unlimited type douchebag. His girlfriend had to be like 18 or 20. Remember, he's 35. She was very sweet, and he was a huge a-hole. But when I bring them their food and assure them that everything is all right, I start to walk back to the kitchen. The guy stands up and grabs the girl's arm hard and is yelling, "We're effing leaving, let's go." The girl is calming him down like he's a dangerous animal, just calmly shing him and telling him, it's okay, we just need to calm down. And he ends up basically dragging her out of the restaurant. They didn't even touch their food. Next story. Not a waiter, but this happened to me as a dinner guest at a very opulent mansion. I do a lot of creative work stuff in the arts. I often got pitched by people to do some freelance things with them. Other times, people want advice and guidance about film or publishing. So I was having dinner with a very nice couple at their estate. Think guest cottages, horses with many padlocks, 12-stable barn, etc. They were trying to get ideas for a film project and wanted my help. Their concept was a pretty good one, actually, and we were having a nice time. But about halfway through dinner, I noticed that the wife is a little bit more than drunk. Then she started talking very very grandiosely about the arts. She invoked a lot of words like inspiration and revere, and then, alas, poetry. I saw the husband kind of sag in his chair. It was a gesture of surrender, or maybe of a, here we go. However, at any rate, at the mention of poetry, the wife ejects herself from her chair, twirls away into the other room, from where she produces sundry rummaging around noises, and then she swans triumphantly back into the dining room and deposits a stack of papers encased in an old spiral-bound notebook that has a university's insignia on it. "These," she announced, "are my poems." When she said this, she glared meaningfully at the husband. "I would like to have," meaningful glare, "a professional look at them, because not everyone," meaningful glare, "is appreciative," glare, "of my high art," glare. Then she looked at me like I was every messiah who ever lived. "You see, OP, I need a real poet's input." And I didn't think she could possibly mean right at that moment. I didn't think she really meant read these poems now in front of my discouraging husband and submit to me the praises I deserve, compliment me now, you knave. But that is exactly what she meant. So I read them, there at the table, drinking as much wine as I could as I went along. And as the husband made a lot of conciliatory gestures to her and a lot of covert "what can you do" expressions to me. And I'll say one thing about those poems. They had consistency. They had clarity of vision. They had great unity of theme and subject matter. Because each and every poem was about zombie sex, rotting and gory and oozing corpses effing each other every which way. Every single poem. And this was only about halfway through the evening. I still had about an hour and a half of this stuff to deal with, and for the rest of the night, we never changed the subject. Every sentence was a sentence about her work. Either I was trying to give a convincing compliment that wouldn't offend the husband, or wife was congratulating herself for rhyming gore with more, or her husband was trying to be conciliatory. It's not easy to compliment someone about zombie adult content for an hour and a half, but that's what I did. And it was very stressful, because if I gave wife a compliment that was too nice, she would use it as ammunition against the husband. See, Reginald, he thinks the use of simile is powerful. He thinks the rent flesh and unhallowed shrieking of passionate love-making of the dead is powerful. What? What did we just read? What did I just narrate? What did I just act out for you? I'm getting paid for this, but what? Oh my God, that was awesome. You know, I want to be a screenwriter, and I hope I make it big. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but like, I could totally see myself in this situation. Like, there's still a bit of a people pleaser in me. I could so see myself in this situation. Like, OP's a writer who probably is trying to be nice. Oh my God. What the They didn't do this in The Walking Dead, I'll tell you that. Anyway, next story. So, I didn't get to hear the conversation, but I had a couple at my table one moment, and when I went back a few minutes later, only the guy was there. He informed me that he had just been dumped and asked for his check. He paid, finished up his drink, and left. Every server was peeking around the corner looking at the dude as he walked out. Tipped me $5 on a $12 check. Next story. Sat an elderly couple, maybe late 60s down, who have come to the restaurant several times over the past few years. Take their orders, no problem, drop their food off and give them a minute. When I come back to check in on them, the woman is gone and the man is just staring off into space like a zombie. Our conversation. "Hey, how is everything, sir?" "She left me." "So, do you want me to wrap that up for you, or what?" Next story. This crap doesn't even happen at my table, but on my third or fourth shift at my first serving job, I was walking to the back when I heard a little girl crying at a table 2 sections over from my own. This wasn't a tantrum. I could tell she was genuinely upset. I turned around and saw a 5-year-old girl crying her eyes out while 2 older women rubbed her back. I asked them what was wrong, and it turns out she had just taken the little girl to visit her dad in jail. She said she was sad because she doesn't have her daddy at home anymore. The only thing I could do was just to pick her up and give her a hug. She hugged me really tightly and cried on my shoulder for a little bit. In general, I'm not a fan of kids. Hell, I didn't like the kids when I was a kid. There's something about seeing a child devastated because they miss their parents, though, that will soften even the hardest child-hating heart. So I sat down and ate with them. I really think she just needed some male attention. As I was slurping away on a bowl of soup, she told me all about what school was like, who her best friend is, and what her favorite TV shows are. I hope her dad is out by now. Next story. Most awkward one I've had was 2 guests. The first one was an old man, and he said, "Where's our waiter been? You should slap his ass next time he walks by." Then guest 2, the younger man, says, "More like eat his ass, am I right?" Luckily, the waiter they were talking about and I were in the corner refilling water pitchers to overhear. Then the most personal story, 2 guests. One was a mother figure with muffled tears saying, "I don't understand. Why would you do that? Don't you love your family and friends?" Then guest 2, the son figure, says, "No one remembered my birthday, and I have no friends besides the dog." I was in a corner refilling pitchers when I overheard. Served for 7 years. Next story. I tried typing this story many times, but I'm going to give it bluntly, sod the explanations. So, Indian man and Caucasian woman, both are walk-ins on a Saturday night. Every time I take an order, the man orders everything, including what the woman is having. She barely spoke a word. I come and go a few times. She was visibly pissed off. The man goes to the toilet. She asks my age, if I am single, and what time I get off work that night. I responded that I have a girlfriend and I will not be out till around 2 a.m. on a Saturday. And I thought nothing of it. Now, the couple had been weird. I mean, really weird. Shifty eyes, seemed nervous, etc., etc. So the man says, "I'm just going to the cigar shop. Can we settle the bill with my wife?" So he goes down. I slap the bill on the table, get flagged down by another customer I do. Then after dealing with it, their table is empty. I assume it is a cash payment, yet there is nothing. They must be on the first floor bar. So I take the receipt out of the sleeve and see some writing. It simply said the Four Seasons Hotel, a room number, and a phone number. And sorry. Turns out they skipped the bill and fled the restaurant. Weird encounter that was kind of personal. Fortunately, they paid for a drink before they dined on their debit card, and we charged their whole £400 bill to the card. I never phoned that number, never bothered with that hotel. I had a girlfriend at the time, yet man, who knows what that crap was about. Next story. One day I was on lunch shift and the other server had 2 of her friends pop in. They ended up being my table, and it was the last table of my shift. I don't know what happened or what they were going through, but the guy was yelling at the girl, and she was crying her eyes out. I had to awkwardly check in on them and bring them a beer. Luckily, they were the only table. I couldn't leave until they finished either. Next story. Probably not exactly what you were looking for, but as I was walking up to greet a table, I overheard them discussing, loudly and angrily, how much of a craphead Donald Trump is. Now, I live in the Bible Belt and work with and wait on Trump supporters on a regular basis, but I'm too close to the table to try and duck getting sucked into this conversation. But I go, "Hey guys, how we doing today?" "We're doing okay. Hey, let me ask you something. What do you think about Donald Trump?" And I look around the dining room carefully, and I say, not a fan, really." "Fantastic! Your tip just went up." They proceed to talk politics for most of the time they were there, and tried to get me to elaborate on my own beliefs a few times. I told them the truth, which is that I support Sanders, but I will be voting for Clinton in the fall, before I finally said that I really can't discuss that kind of stuff in uniform. I've walked into couples fighting, families spewing hate at each other, etc., etc., but that was the one time that made me the most uncomfortable for some reason. They left me a $20 tip and wrote a note saying, "Thanks for not supporting that MF," or something like that. Edit. Also, not exactly an answer to your question, but definitely relevant. One time, I saw a guy kneel over and die about 10 feet away from me. Older gentleman with his family. He had a heart attack and just bit the dust. We luckily have a few trained nurses who work there, but they couldn't save him. You could see the whole ordeal. Probably took 30 minutes before he was officially dead from my section of tables, and I was very suddenly privy to personal conversation from pretty much everybody. The family, my tables, the other servers. People were bawling, praying, discussing death, etc. This is surprisingly common in restaurants, so there's probably a lot of us here who have seen that kind of thing. Next story. On more than one occasion, I had breakups occur at my tables, but the most intimate conversation I had overheard was from a father discussing funeral and burial details with his 2 sons. Young daughter, 6 to 7 years old, was seated there too. Their mother had just died. My own mom died when I was a kid, and they told me it was tough because she had died so suddenly from an aneurysm. I cried in the kitchen for a bit. Crap was rough. I gave them all some dessert on me. Next story. I have a buddy of mine, and we eat together, and we have a game where we try to use that last pre-waitress line of conversation to embarrass the other guy. Some of our greatest hits are, "How do you force someone to get an abortion?" "Hey, you're way less racist than I heard." "No, child support isn't optional. You might be in trouble, man. Seriously, have a proctologist look at that." "But a pillow can't love you back." Then sometimes my buddy will say to the waitress, "Hey, can a man get a sea lion pregnant?" "No." "See, you got nothing to worry about, John." I'm actually surprised that this hasn't been brought up yet. I feel like 1 or 2 of the other stories we've heard probably have included this. I feel like someone's done this. And also, I would probably do this if I was with a friend. I'll do that on Xbox too when I'm gaming with the homies. Somebody will join the party and I'm like, yep, guys, that's how you milk a cow. And someone's like, what did I just walk into? Anyway, next story. So, I worked at Chili's about 15 years ago, and there was a table of 4 guys and 1 girl. The guys kept coming to the bar to order 4 shots of water and 1 shot of vodka, but they were seated in the dining area, out of view from the bar. It took us, serving staff and bartenders, about 3 rounds to figure out what was going on. Once we did, we had 2 of the waitresses follow the girl into the bathroom and tell the girl what was going on. She said that they had just met the guys earlier that day. This was before cell phones were everywhere, so they took her back to the office where she called some friends to come get her. And I still look back on that and think about how awful that could have turned out if we hadn't all intervened and been observant at our tables and at the bar. I was very proud to be a part of the staff that night. Next story. I walked up during what looked like a lull in conversation between a young couple, but the girl launched into prayer instead, asking for help in keeping her guy away from the temptations of the flesh and such. As she went on, eyes closed, the guy looked up at me and shrugged. I never found out what it was all about specifically, but he obviously wasn't taking it seriously, while it was a dire situation for her. They'd only gotten drinks by the time she obviously broke up with him. It was so awkward to ask whether they wanted to order or not, or if they just wanted to check. Next story. Right after my shift, I was sitting down and doing all of the paperwork for my tips when I saw this couple starting to get irritated with each other. The girl is sitting looking at her phone, and the guy is talking at her. Guy says, "At least Sarah doesn't spend all my effing money on a dummy." Girl doesn't lift her eyes from her phone, grabs her glass of water, and dumps it in guy's lap. The guy stands up and puts some bills on the table and just walks out. She apologized to the bartender but was crying at this point. I never got the context, but I don't think I really needed it. Next story. I was serving the table of middle-aged ladies who were talking about the middle one's daughter who was a kind of a wild child, partying and whatnot. I was grabbing a bunch of plates right as one of them was saying, "She's a loose cannon." And I jumped in like an idiot and said, "But damn it, she's the best cop on the force and she gets the results." They looked at me like I just let the daughter snort coke off of my ass in the bathroom. Still, hit a 20% tip though. Next story. Slightly different, but I am a bartender, and in an old job I worked the bar in a casino. Part of my job was to run these cocktail masterclasses, which basically consisted of only hen parties. Now, being in a rather large northern UK city, hen parties weren't exactly a classy affair, so our old boss briefed me and one other bartender, and to our absolute disgust, we had to do one of these masterclasses for a group of 42. Instantly, our hearts sank. So we got it underway, and it was rowdy from the outset. I was only 18 at the time, but looked a little older due to my facial hair. My colleague was a few years older, but not much. But the whole session was out of control. We had 42 women on a hen party, all ranging from about 35 to 55. Rough northern women. And I remember going over to one group of the ladies who has their back to me, and as I went to speak to them, I heard the conversation they were having. "Oh, I'd let both of them F me on the stage over there. Oh, I'd shove that thing right up me ass." And my personal favorite, "I wouldn't even let me husband do me up the arse, but these two could have it any day." Safe to say, I backed away quickly. Very quickly. The only satisfaction I got that night was telling them how old I was after the borderline essay/master class was over. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. You know, I don't know many older women in my life, just apart from relatives, but one thing I've learned from doing these 2 channels, really and Undersparked, older women are so horny and I love it. I don't like essay though, I'll say that. But if they're talking in private, why not, I guess? Where can I find a cougar around here? Does anybody know? Anyway, next story. So, obligatory not a waiter, but this happened a few times to us. The most awkward was when she walked over to us and we were arguing about cannibalism. Basically, it was a would you eat a human if it gave you powers? And we were arguing about what part of a human would probably taste the best. Then, another time, one walked into us arguing about coleslaw, whether it was salad or a condiment, and if it should be eaten by itself as a snack. Then, another time, one walked into us arguing about coleslaw, whether it was a salad or a condiment, and if it should be eaten by itself as a snack. She intimately sat down with us and argued about it as well for 10 minutes. My group of friends has weird arguments. Next story. I am a dude server at an Italian place. I was serving at 4 top, 2 married couples, I presumed. They were a real awesome group, full of energy, so I cracked jokes and tried to be extra charming while telling them the specials for the evening. The ladies, though, they were pretty flirtatious, but tame at first. Then one of the wives starts really hitting on me. "You're just so handsome and charming. I love your hair and everything about you." And the table gets a little uncomfortable, but I'm not shaken. I graciously accept her compliment and try to move on, but she continues, "You're so young. You make a hot, middle-aged woman like myself just, ooh." And she shudders and starts fanning herself with a menu. And this is where her husband had an outburst. "Stop it. Just stop it. You're being way over the effing top right now." I had no idea what to do or say, so I just started talking to the other couples and taking their order. My guess is the husband isn't hitting it right. Next story. When I was 16 and stupid, as opposed to 22 and stupid like I am now, I started waiting tables and had a table of two, a man and a woman, who were signing a whole bunch of papers and talking about something that seemed serious. I took their orders, checked in on them and all that server stuff, when eventually the woman started breaking down crying. Now, being young and inexperienced, I didn't know what I should have done. To this day, I don't really know what I should have done, but one thing I shouldn't have done was ask her what was wrong. The man looked down, looking about as uncomfortable as I felt. She didn't respond because she was crying. Eventually, I picked up on the obvious context clues that I should get the F out. And later, I told my older coworker about what a weird experience I just had. And he said, and I'm just paraphrasing, of course, "Marcus, you're an effing idiot. They're having a divorce. Leave them alone." And he called me Marcus because that's my name. If that wasn't bad enough, though, when they were ready for the check, I go, "Okay, separate or together? The bill, I mean." And she starts crying. I give them the check, and when they left the restaurant, I was very surprised when they didn't tip well. Next story. This might not be exactly what you're after, but it was awkward to say the least. I had to have been 18 and waitressing at a restaurant with a no-gun policy. I live in a constitutional carry state that used to be concealed carry, and there are a lot of gun enthusiasts. However, the area I live in is more densely populated and thus has a higher amount of liberals, read anti-gun, than the rest of the state. So anyway, I walked up to the table to bring them their drinks, and I hear the early 20s son say, "Well, if I wanted to, I could just waltz in here and set my gun on the table, and they couldn't say crap about it because it isn't concealed." And his mom looked uncomfortable and tried correcting him because this is when you still needed your concealed carry license to carry wherever you went. The son was convinced that just because it was openly carried, that he could do whatever the F he wanted. Then, I later walked up to them talking about some costume party, where the mother asked if he could wear a mask, and then the son loudly replied, "A mask on me would look like a thong on a fat person." And I was grateful when they paid and they left. Next story. So I'm super late to this, but I have a great story for this particular topic. I've posted about it before, but I'll tell it again. So I get a two-top with a man dressed like a cowboy who had a fantastic mustache, and a woman who worked as a stripper at the only strip club in town. She came in pretty regularly with a different man every time, if you catch my drift, and I went to see what they wanted to drink. He ordered a beer, she ordered a margarita on the rocks with salt. I went and put on their drinks. Then, when their drinks were up at the bar, I grabbed them along with some bread, and I made my way back to their table. I asked if they were ready to order. The man got a filet, medium rare. I went to take her order, and then she said, "I'm just drinking my dinner for tonight." And I told her that I liked her style, and then she looked at me and said, "You'd be drinking too if your daughter just got checked into a facility." Then she just started crying. I didn't know what to do, so I told her I was sorry to hear that, and I walked away. Then I went and put the man's order in, and when I came out of the kitchen, he was waiting for me. He looked horrified. He handed me $50, told me to make his order to go and to keep the change. They left before it was ready. It was a very good tip, and I got to eat that steak, though. It was delicious. Well, everybody, this has been a surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly fun video. This felt like a sleeper hit of some peculiar stories, but I mean, whenever you work at a job that has to deal with the people, you get everything, right? There was that one person earlier who said, "I feel like a lot of people have probably seen somebody die at a table." I feel like we only got that once or twice where somebody died at the restaurant. But this one was incredibly fun to narrate. I think you could tell I was having fun, and I enjoy acting some of the stories sometimes. But anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Feel free to share your own stories if you got any. Have a really good day, and bye-bye!